My name is Damon Brown of DamonBrown.net. My thing is helping you as a side hustler, as a solopreneur, or any type of non-traditional entrepreneur, whether you're in a business as an entrepreneur, or if you're on your own like myself as an entrepreneur. Today we're going to talk about how to prioritize your life, particularly a killer parable from the late Stephen Covey. He had a book called First Things First, classic stuff. It's not quite of my generation, but a generation before me. You're talking about people that were doing business in the 70s or 80s. They know about the book First Things First. It was a classic as much as some of the more recent books like Start With Why and other books that have come out in the last couple of decades are a classic now. Anyway, Stephen Covey has a great parable that talks about how you can prioritize your life. The way he breaks it down is this. Imagine that you have a jar. I wish I could grab a jar here. Imagine if you have a jar and you have big rocks and little rocks, right? Imagine you're on the beach and you got some big rocks and little rocks in there. You dump all the rocks out. Now you can take all the little rocks and put them into the jar. Cool, they fit in the jar. But then when you go and put the big rocks in there, they won't fit anymore, right? Because the little rocks aren't going to move. However, if you dump everything out again and you put in the big rocks, and then you put in all the pebbles, little rocks, small rocks, everything fits fine. Of course, this is a parable or analogy, and that analogy, the size represents your priorities. What's important to you? If you end up focusing just on the small stuff, it's not going to fit because then you're going to end up losing the big stuff, and those big things won't get done. The first thing is that, number one, seems obvious, you need to know what your priorities are, right? What are your big rocks? I think he literally says that in the book First Things First. So what are your big rocks? When I did Cuddler, which was my second startup, I bootstrapped it, co-founded it with two other folks, ended up getting really big. We had 250,000 users. We ended up selling it within a year at a profit. Sounds like a Cinderella story. At that same time, though, I was actually the primary caretaker of my wife and I's first son. And we led Cuddler from when he had turned 1 to we sold it right after his second birthday. You can imagine the chaos as far as me being a primary caretaker. We're on the cover of the Wall Street Journal. We're on the late night talk shows, et cetera, et cetera. I've talked about this in my keynotes, and you can read more about it in Built From Now and some of my other books. Anyway, he was my big rock. And then when his younger brother came shortly after we sold the app, then they became my big rocks. And everything I built, all the way up to my TED Talks, my best-selling books right behind me, all the way to talking to you, they have always been the big rocks. Now, those rocks have gotten smaller over time because now they're older. They don't need me as much. In fact, I wouldn't even be able to talk to you right now. I wouldn't be able to launch this conversation, have these shows, if they were still my big rocks as they were when they were babies or definitely as toddlers. So knowing that, all the small rocks included me doing the Startup Cuddler, included me writing these best-selling books, included, frankly, me talking to you. And so those rocks changed over time. So number one, knowing what your priorities are, and then just as importantly, knowing when those priorities change. And I think that's a key part of it. Something I've talked about quite a bit is that done is better than perfect. Done is better than perfect. I actually got this from my friend Laura Vanderkam. I mentioned her before. She's a time management expert. She has an excellent book called Off the Clock. But this is where I heard this from. She got it from somewhere else, but I got it from her. Done is better than perfect means that you need to create and build from now. Hence the title of my new book, Build From Now. In other words, there's not going to be an ideal time for you to create. There's never going to be a perfect output for whatever you do. There's never going to be, again, enough time for you to do what you're going to do. You're never going to be focused enough to do what you need to do. You're never going to have enough energy to do what you need to do. There's never going to be perfect or ideal circumstances. So the best you can do is create. How many times have you thought, I'm going to work on this tomorrow when these circumstances are right, and then a year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years passes by, and you wonder what happened? What happened is that you're waiting for ideal circumstances. This isn't a slam on you, because I've been in those situations. In fact, my second and last TED Talk, where I talk about why you should strive for good enough, you should look it up. You can check it out on this channel if you happen to watch it on YouTube or another channel, or you can go to TED.com and look up Damon Brown and find it. That's exactly what I talk about, is that we end up focusing on wanting things to be ideal these ideal circumstances, so we wait for them. And then things start to atrophy and the opportunity is missed. That's just as bad as not knowing what priorities you have. And so number one, you really want to think about what those priorities are. What are your big rocks? Build everything around it. My big rock is my family. After that, it's my health and well-being. And after that is everything else. If it doesn't fit within those big rocks, then it's not going to happen. Me talking to you fits within these big rocks right now, hence me being able to contribute to you right now. So number one, knowing what your big rocks are. Know your priorities. Number two, understanding that done is better than perfect. It's better to get something done, to create and have something out there. It does not have to be perfect. If you want to know better and more about the resources that you have and how to have a better impact on your world, go and visit me over at buildfromnowquiz.com. That's buildfromnowquiz.com. It's a free quiz based on my new book, Build From Now, How to Know Your Power, See Your Abundance, and Nourish the World. It'll take about 2 minutes. It's 3 or 4 multiple choice questions. Hundreds of y'all have taken it. I'm grateful for that, and it will give you insight into your biggest resource between focus, agility, time, and energy. And based on that, number one, you'll get a good framework for the book if you end up grabbing the book. But even if you don't grab the book, it'll give you really good insight into where you should put your resources and where your strengths are so you can make the biggest impact in the world. Until next time, remember that you can always bring your worth and that you can always build from now. Take care.